Today we're going to look into the critical importance of comparing homicide rates across different regions. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on two big cities, Houston and Chicago, and comparing them to the overall U.S. average. Homicide rates are an essential indicator of public safety, social stability, and the overall health of the community. By comparing data from various regions, we gain valuable insights that help shape policies, improve law enforcement strategies, and promote a more effective approach to violence prevention. To begin, I'd like to first address why it's important to compare homicide rates in these different regions. Homicide rates are a direct reflection of a society's level of violence, but they're also influenced by a multitude of factors such as socioeconomic conditions, local policies, law enforcement practices, and the community's engagement as a whole. By comparing different cities and regions, we can identify patterns, understand the underlying causes of these incidents, and develop tailored solutions to reduce these incidents. When we look at cities like Houston and Chicago, we're examining two of the largest metropolitan areas in the country, both of which face unique challenges in terms of crime rates, population density, and social inequalities. By comparing them to the overall U.S. average, we can gain a clearer understanding of where these cities stand in relation to the broader national context. First, looking at this graph, we can obviously see a difference in rates between Houston, Chicago, and the overall U.S. average. However, they are similar in which they all spiked significantly in 2020. This is due to many different factors, including things such as the COVID-19 pandemic, George Floyd's death, and others that are still being investigated and looked into today. In Chicago, the pattern is slightly different. Chicago's homicide rate has been historically high even before the spike in 2020. Over the years, it has consistently been higher than the national average, peaking in 2016 and remaining elevated compared to the rest of the U.S. This long-standing issue in Chicago reflects a combination of factors, including systematic poverty, gang violence, gun access, among others. While there are fluctuations, it's clear that Chicago's homicide rate has remained a significant challenge. By looking at these statistics and comparing the different regions and environments, it helps criminologists to determine the causes of different crimes, specifically homicide in this case. Over the past decade, homicide rates have exhibited significant fluctuations across various regions. In the United States, the Council on Criminal Justice reported a 9.4% decline in murders during the first half of 2023 compared to the same period of 2022, though these rates remain 24% higher than pre-pandemic levels. Although it may seem that these rates have been dropping due to the high levels that they went to in the past few years, they are still significantly higher than those in the past decade. News sources, like the ones depicted, manipulate their words and headlines to make the readers view their stories in the way that they want. This can both be good and bad in different ways. For one, it can keep communities alert and positive when it comes to serious matters. However, it can also give people a sense of false hope for things when they're still a large problem in this society. And you can see this where all of these articles are from around the same time, but they're all saying different things. This graph shows a better visual representation of the comparison between different regions. We see that cities in larger populations and complex socioeconomic conditions like Houston and Chicago tend to experience higher rates of violent crime, particularly homicide. These cities face unique challenges such as poverty, gun violence, and organized crime, which contribute to higher homicide rates. Another important takeaway is that while the national homicide rate has increased, it has not experienced the same dramatic spike as those seen in cities like Houston and Chicago. This disparity highlights the need for localized targeted interventions. National policies or average data cannot be directly applied to every region, as local contexts vary widely. And as I mentioned earlier, the COVID-19 pandemic clearly had a significant impact on homicide rates, with both Houston and Chicago seeing sharp increases. This is a critical point to discuss as it underscores the broader societal effects that public health crises can have on crime. The pandemic made existing social issues such as unemployment, mental health struggles, and the lack of social services worse than before. These likely contributed to the rise in homicides. Diving deeper into the 2020 spike increase, it is shown in this diagram that even smaller or less known cities were increasingly significantly as well. So as you can see over in Spokane, Washington, there was an increase of about 279% when they only have a population of about 229,000 compared to Chicago's population of about 2,700,000, where their spike only increased by 66%. Another notable city in this diagram is Minneapolis, Minnesota, where George Floyd was murdered, which caused an outbreak of crime that later spread through the rest of the U.S. By looking at these stats, along with the environment, time, and demographic of people who live there, you can better understand why these increases and decreases of homicide spike so rapidly. The data reveals both shared challenges and unique regional issues. By looking at Houston, Chicago, and the U.S. national average, we can identify key factors that contribute to the violent crime rates in these cities and start hopefully crafting solutions that are both data-driven and contextually appropriate. For instance, in Chicago, efforts to address gang violence, improve policing, and create economic opportunities in unserved communities could be prioritized. In Houston, the rise in homicide post-pandemic might necessitate a focus on mental health services, community policing, and anti-violence programs. Meanwhile, looking at the national average, we can analyze broader trends and allocate resources for violence prevention programs that might address national issues like gun control or mental health support. Understanding these regional differences is vital for policymakers, law enforcement agencies, and community leaders. It allows them to adapt their strategies and ensure that interventions are both effective and responsive to the local context. One-size-fits-all solutions rarely work when it comes to complex societal issues like homicide, and comparing data across regions helps us avoid that pitfall as a whole. Comparing homicide rates across different regions like Houston, Chicago, and the national average is more than just an academic resource. It's a tool that helps us understand the complexities of violent crime and help address it. By analyzing these trends, we can develop more effective policies and interventions tailored to the unique needs of those specific regions. As a society, we need to continue to explore and analyze these trends and remember that behind every statistic is a person, a family, and a community. Reducing homicide rates isn't just about lowering numbers, it's about making our communities safer, more resilient, and more connected. Thank you.